So from tech to oil. BP is planning its first bond sale since the rig explosion in the Gulf of Mexico in April that caused the largest offshore oil spill in U.S. history. A person familiar with the offering tells Bloomberg that BP plans to sell $3.5 billion of debt in two parts. And according to a regulatory filing, BP plans to issue 5- and 10-year notes through BP Capital Markets.
Well, BP's oil spill fighting plan and the government are both facing harsh criticism from the panel investigating the disaster. The chairman compared the plans to General Custer, underestimating the number of Indians he was facing. Our Lizzie O'Leary sat down for an exclusive interview with the government's point man on the oil spill, retired Coast Guard Admiral Thad Allen. Lizzie joins us from Washington. Lizzie?
Yeah, well, those remarks came from a hearing looking at the oil spill response and talking about that response with Thad Allen. I sat down with him and asked him why the response plan took so long to activate, why both BP and the government seemed ill-prepared to know exactly how much oil they were facing.
We have to go back and look at the spill plans. I think we need to look at the worst-case discharge that was in the plan, the required amount of materials that need to be brought to the scene and so forth. I think we need to understand that these plans were aimed at a massive monolithic spill pointed one direction coming at land, and that's not what we encountered. We encountered over 80 different spills every day based on the wind and the sea currents.
Why were the flow rate estimates so low for so long?
I'd say it's a lack of information and being able to bring it together and coordinate it in one place. I finally took the step of establishing a flow rate technical group because I want an independent government estimate, not related to BP, based on the best science we could get, and then be able to refine that as we went through the life cycle of the event, and that's what we did.
But you know, if you go back and look, there are internal memos that show that BP was estimating the size of the spill at some 55,000 barrels per day. In July, the government didn't put a 60,000 barrel threshold on there until August. So what was the disconnect? Why not look at even BP's worst internal estimates? And did that change the way you all responded to the spill?
It did not. From the outset, we knew this could be a catastrophic spill. What really changed the nature of the spill was how the oil disaggregated and how widely dispersed it became, putting a strain on resources, boom, skimming equipment, and so forth. On the flow rate, we elected to try and do this based on science, based on the information we had, and we had to develop more information where we didn't have it. Anywhere from having the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute actually deploy sensors to try and get acoustical measurements of the volume, to getting high-resolution video off the ROVs and into shore, where we could actually use it rather than the low-quality video that was being backed by satellite. All that had to come together. That's the reason we took Marshall McNutt from the U.S. Geological Survey and put some scientists in the room and said, start working this problem, and we'll continue to refine it.
You once told me that this was sort of the Bob and Thad show. You and Bob Dudley would be on the phone. You said sometimes you'd text. Did you get the cooperation that you needed from BP, and how can you get the cooperation you needed from BP if, in the end, this company is going to be a defendant with the United States bringing a civil or criminal case against it?
The only effective way to do this is to separate out these roles. If you're involved in the response, and I was responsible for overseeing the response, the investigation is a separate issue, and that will determine the cause, and the Department of Justice will figure out what they're going to do. My goal is to optimize the response, so my dealings with BP were to control the source of the oil, enhance our ability to recover it on shore, and do it the best we could to make the Gulf whole again. And my focus was entirely on that. They knew that, and in my interactions with them, they knew that that's what we were required to do together, and that's what I expected of them.
Well, and yet the flow rate, though, will be a key part of the investigation because penalties are based on flow.
Well, the ultimate flow rate, it may even evolve again if we get more information, will be used to determine that, but that'll be done through the legal process, through the Department of Justice. Again, the response is focused on getting the oil off the water.
And remember, those penalties are $1,000 per barrel if we're talking about a civil case, or $4,300 per barrel if we're talking about gross negligence or a criminal investigation. A source familiar with the criminal investigation says that could go on for about a year, guys. And we'll have more of my exclusive interview with Thad Allen, also about that report that said all that oil was gone, and what he thought about that report later on.
Lizzie, if I might ask you quickly, Admiral Allen, he had... Some people say an impossible job to go down there and try to deal with that whole situation. You were down there. You got a sense of what he was faced with. What sense did you get just sitting there, just talking to him?
that he's relieved that this is his last week on the job.
Yeah, no
Look,
doubt.
Admiral Allen spent a lot of time down there, and he wore multiple hats, as you heard him say. He was coordinating with state and local officials, and he was also working hand in hand, in fact, in the same building with BP. I was in the building, and they sat just a few feet from one another. One thing he suggested yesterday was that in a future oil spill, there'll be maybe a third party there, because he said the appearance of a conflict of interest made it very hard to do that job.
All right, our Lizzie O'Leary in Washington with her exclusive interview with Admiral Thad Allen. Lizzie, thanks so much. Appreciate it.